everybody tonight? If you could just tap into the chat box if you are a returning person for these conversations, and if you'll put down just what you do and where you're from, we're going to go ahead and jump in here and get started. We're going to start with Dr. Gibbs and let him do a quick introduction, and then I'll introduce myself, and we're going to talk to, in my mind, the legendary Judge Sheila Calloway. So we're gonna have some hard conversations tonight about the impact of race and the connection between the school to prison pipeline and her perspective as being a judge. So Ricki, jump on in.
Hey, so welcome back to some of you and to our new guests. We appreciate you hanging with us this evening. Like we say all the time, if you're not ready for an open and honest conversation, this may not be the line for you, because tonight we're going to truly dig into something that I'm passionate about when it comes to the school to prison pipeline. If I have not had the chance to meet you, my name is Ricki Gibbs, and I have the privilege of serving as a school leader in Nashville, and I've done this work for about 15 years now. If you know my story, you know that I was given two choices growing up: to find and have a great education, or be a part of the streets. And we're going to dig into that as we get deeper in this conversation, and we're going to talk about just the critical role of educators in this process as we work to disrupt that school to prison pipeline. Throughout the conversation, if there are things that resonates with you, feel free to put it on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Use that hashtag Disruptors Unite, because as we dig into this work, it's truly going to take us as disruptors to change the narrative for our boys and girls to ensure that they have access to the true American dream with a great education.
So welcome back. If you guys are back, I am also kind of moderating here, trying to get everybody into the room. And I made a grave mistake. For those of you who have hosted Zooms, I did not click the auto mute everybody. So I'm trying to go in and mute you. So if you could just check your microphone and mute that would be very helpful. Cut out some of the background noise. So I'm Mathew Portell. I'm a principal here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm also the founder of Paradigm Shift Education, which is a consulting company where I speak a lot about trauma-informed practices around what my school and my amazing educators and teachers have done, which some of them are on here tonight, and I appreciate that they're here, even preparing to get ready for this year that we're starting off virtually. So really glad to have you guys back. I think Judge just popped back out, so hopefully she'll jump right back in. And we are honored to have her. I consider Judge Calloway a great friend of mine. We've spoken at various different things together. She's spoken to my fourth graders. She's spoken to my staff. She's amazing, and she is definitely a disruptor. And when you're talking about disrupting a judicial system, a juvenile judicial system that has long set kids on a trajectory that is a failure for them only because of situations that they may be in or situations they may have come from, it is great to have somebody as Judge Calloway to be able to speak to us tonight here. So Judge, I guess you are actually still on here. So we're gonna let you do your introduction. And it's probably gonna sound like Ricki and I, when I know you were also a troublemaker in school.
Who said that?
You did.
Me? Moi? Yes, I definitely was a troublemaker in school. I was, my sister said she may join us at some point, but my sister was the golden child, and she was 2 years older than me. And she always studied, always had her homework turned in, never made any issues in class. She was just always paying attention. She was that golden child. And then 2 years later, here I come, and they keep asking me over and over and over again, "Are you sure that's your sister? Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's us." So I was definitely a disruptor then, and my teachers probably didn't really understand what my role was in their classroom. And I never not learned how to not disrupt. And so that's what I've been doing. I see her responding. And so I've always been a disruptor. And so after leaving school, I came to Nashville, Tennessee, to go to school at Vanderbilt University. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer when I grew up. Didn't know I was going to be a judge, but definitely knew I wanted to be a lawyer. Stayed at Vanderbilt. I am a double door, go Doors. And we may win some games this year because the stadiums will be empty and we may have a chance. But after I graduated from law school, I was a public defender in the adult division. And although I enjoyed the experience and it did a lot for me in learning about just the legal process and everything that went on to it, I felt all the time like I was just a speed bump on the road to injustice is the way I like to call it. I was a speed bump on the road to injustice. There was never any true opportunity to help people, in my opinion, and to make changes in the system and to do anything. I had an opportunity to get transferred to the juvenile division. Carl Dean was my boss, and there was an opening, and I went and begged him, and he was like, okay, if you want to do that. That was in 1998. I've been in juvenile court ever since, first as a public defender, then as a juvenile court magistrate, and now as the elected judge. And the reason that I love this place is because I actually have the opportunity to make positive changes and to do things to change the system and change the trajectory of our youth. We have an opportunity now to look at the entire family makeup and to really help make a difference and work with the schools and with wonderful people like Principal Portell and making sure that we're being restorative and rehabilitative to all of our youth and looking at their adverse childhood experiences and the traumas that they go through and making sure that we can help them become resilient. And, that's my focus, and I'm absolutely excited about this conversation and ready to have those tough talks. Thank you.
You're still muted, Portell. That's what always happen.
It's my first Zoom. It's the first one I've ever done, besides the last ones that I've done. So we're going to watch a very quick little video, and I created this when I did a CAD talk for the Child Advocacy Day in Nashville on the Hill. And I want you to look at the statistics because it's going to correlate to the conversation tonight that we're going to have. And Ricki and I, or Dr. Gibbs and I, are going to share some more statistics that are going to push our conversation tonight. So just give this a quick little watch and a listen. Sorry, just a second, guys. I've moved the waiting room to underneath the toolbar, so it's not, I can't get to the people. There we go. All right, sorry about that. Here we go again. All right, sorry about that. share a few statistics really quick. Ricki, if you'll jump in.
Yeah, so before we jump into these numbers, I want to replay. I don't need you to replay it. I'm gonna just recite some of those numbers, because some of that stuff, it may have kind of just glossed over everyone and not really hit home. But I want you to listen to these numbers and just make it make sense to you when we talk about the school to prison pipeline. 1.7 million students are in schools with police, but not a school counselor. 3 million students are in schools with police, but not a school nurse. 6 million students are in schools with police, but not a psychologist. 10 million students are in schools with police, but no social worker. And lastly, 14 million students are in schools with police, but no counselors, nurse, psychologist, or social worker. When you put all that together, that just underscores the thought process, that the importance of the conversation we're getting ready to have. And as you know, me and Portell are going to dig into it, because we have some tough questions we're going to put in front of Judge Calloway, just to help us start thinking through this, because at the end of the day, everyone on this call is a disruptor. That's why we always say disruptors unite. So we're going to lean on the judge expertise to give us some more strategies that we can put inside our tool belt to really help us change that narrative. So, did you know schools with police reported 3.5 times as many arrests as schools without police? That should be self-explanatory. If the police are already there, situations that will normally be handled by a teacher, a principal, a social worker, if a social worker was in the building, a psychologist or a counselor, if they were in the building, now are handled by the SRO or the police officer. And we have to remember, police officers are trained in law and order and not how to help de-escalate or to help heal a child that's experiencing trauma. Something that hits home to me personally: Black students are suspended or expelled 3 times the rate of their white peers. And that's something, as we talk through the lens of implicit bias that we've hit on in previous conversations, that we definitely want to cycle back to, because that's something that we're battling right now in the state of Tennessee. And then also, Black females are suspended 7 times the rate of white females. I'm gonna say that one more time, because that's a number that should be outlandish to everyone. Black females are suspended 7 times the rate of white females. And in all these situations, they're normally, when we look at these numbers, it's normally for the same offense. So what is it about the offense when a minority commits the same offense than one of their white peers, that they're pushed out of school or suspended or expelled at a higher rate? And that just sets the stage as you begin to get kicked out of school to begin to be truant, which leads to the prison system, which leads, you have more empty time. And I don't know about y'all, but my grandmother always told me idle hands are the devil's workshop. So again, leads to situations that get pushed to the prison system. Portell?
Yeah, and Ricki, I really appreciate you saying that, especially earlier about the SROs, is we're putting people in positions that aren't trained to handle situations in certain ways. And I think that we have to have that lens as well when we're talking about SROs in school. They may have received some training, but I also know that in our elementary schools, we don't have a full-time staff, and the one that we do have, he's an amazing guy. He's a kind-hearted guy. He's a great guy, but he's not there when we're dealing with behaviors. And I know there are schools that do. So I think that's important, Ricki, that you did point out that it's a skill set, right? It's training that may not have happened. But another statistic is 70% of students arrested or referred to the school are Black and Latina. And I want to reinforce that 70%, you all. And Judge Calloway can tell you, he remembers the days when 5-year-olds were being dragged out of schools in handcuffs, because it hasn't been that long ago. The less statistics. Black students with disabilities represent 19% of all K-12 students with disabilities, yet they account for 36% of students with disabilities suspended from school. So we're taking our kids with the highest needs, with the most vulnerability, and we're saying, no, you've got to go home because we can't manage this. Going back to those statistics, at my school, we have 2 trained therapists, one therapist. We forgot to say our opinions are our opinions. They're not that of our employer. But yes, we have 2, and it's because we have some students with needs, and we've got to make sure we're supporting them. Lastly, and I think we all know this, and I think this is going to move to our next conversation in the first couple weeks of August, is that 79% of public school teachers are white and 76% are female. You all, this is a major, major topic that we're going to get to. And Ricki, I know you have a lot of feelings and passion about that. But Judge, let's jump in. What do you, when you hear those statistics, what comes to your mind?
You know, it's unfortunate when I hear those numbers. It is clear that those youth that we're kicking out of the school systems for whatever reason are the ones that I see in the court system on a regular basis, and it's disappointing. You know, we see a lot of cases that come from the school that end up in the juvenile system, particularly the detention facility, for things that never should have led to an arrest or any interaction with the police. And the more we have police in the school system, the more that happens. I always like to talk about 2 cases that just rung so true to me of how difficult it is that leads kids to so much trauma. When you think about we are the adults, we are the ones who are trying to protect children, are supposed to be protecting children from trauma, but we put these police officers in the building, and when teachers and staff and administration don't have an answer on how to deal with behaviors, we say, oh, it might be a behavior problem, but let's just call the police. And it's like Dr. Gibbs said, when you call the police, they're trained to do police enforcement. And you have a child, whether that child is 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, and they're misbehaving, and a principal or an administration or a teacher can't deal with it, and they call the police, then the police are going to deal with it the only way they know how. There was one particular case where a child was at a school. The child was a 9-year-old girl. She was in the cafeteria at a school. And the reason I know about this is because we get the child in our detention facility with the arrest report. And when this child comes to us with this arrest report, and we're reading it, and it says it's a 9-year-old girl, and basically what it said is that she refused to go back to the classroom. And people tried to encourage her to go back to the classroom, and she would not budge. And they talked to her, and they tried to call her guardian, and she wouldn't budge, she wouldn't move, she just refused to go to the classroom. And so after they have exhausted all efforts for about 30 minutes, they decide, well, we can't move her, let's call the police. And so the police they come to the scene, and again, they go through the same issue trying to move her. And at some point, the little girl, a 9-year-old girl, says, just take me to juvie. And this is what's in the report. And so they oblige, and they bring her to juvenile court. I immediately released her, because we're not going to keep a 9-year-old in our detention facility, especially for a charge of what? Not going to school, not going to class. That is not a detainable charge, nor is it an arrestable offense. But that's what happened to her. After we did some investigation, what we found out is that child was going through a lot of trauma, had just moved recently to this guardian who they could not reach, had experienced someone died in her family. I believe it's her mother had recently died. And for whatever reason, something must have triggered her so that she did not want to go back to class at that time. And so what we have done as a system, we have put more trauma on top of her already traumatized life and put her in a detention facility. And then when she gets released and she's supposed to go back to school, the question is, how safe now does she feel going back to this school that literally just re-traumatized whatever she was going to? We had another case, and I think Principal Portell loves it when I talk about this case, but in this child in a classroom, literally it was an elementary classroom, the child was having some type of mental health breakdown. And I will say to this day, as if I had been the principal, the teacher, whoever was in the classroom, I don't know what I would have done. And so I recognize that it is a difficult issue to deal with. But this child, in the midst of a mental health crisis, literally strips all of its clothes and starts to defecate in the classroom, and is picking up the stuff and throwing it at people. And
Judge, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I tried to be clean this time. Last time I wasn't as clean when I talked about it, but I'm trying to, because last time I said, somebody's throwing all this at me, I'd have called somebody too. But we call the police in this situation, and I could imagine the police officers are like, what y'all want me to do? But the child's arrested and brought to detention. That is not the response that we should have. And that is what happens when we over-police school systems, and we end up dealing with traumas and mental health breakdowns in a way that is not effective for anybody that's part of the system.
So Judge Calloway, I'm gonna jump in. I got what I consider a bit of a loaded question for you, because you talked about the system a lot, and I'm unapologetic about, I believe we have to disrupt the system because it's setting the stage for a lot of our young people to be unsuccessful. I'm gonna throw some information out to you. We found that online from the ACLU, on average, states across our country spend $88,000 to incarcerate young people, but on average only spend $10,000. But see, one of the babies already agreeing with me. Say they ready to jump in because they know that number's gonna be outlandish. So I'm gonna put that number out there. No, you're good.
Good.
Hey, we work around babies all the time. We get it. That's what this conversation about, to save that baby from that school to prison pipeline. So on average, states spend $88,000 a year to incarcerate a young person, but only spend $10,000 a year to educate them. Obviously, you see young people come in and out of the juvenile justice system, and you have to decide as a judge to not indict them for a situation or a mistake they've made at a young age and make it a life sentence. There's a quote I want to start off with to ask this question. The quote says, "Never be a prisoner of your past. It was just a lesson, not a life sentence." So as thinking about your role as a judge, when we talk about this school to prison pipeline, what's your thought process as you interact with some of these young people who have made mistakes about just trying to educate them to get them back in the school system and out of the court system?
Yeah, Dr. Gibbs, that was a big, loaded, long question.
I told you it was.
You warned me. And let me first start off. There was a chat question about were there resources in those schools that responded to those scenarios that I gave with police versus anything else. At the time, the schools didn't have a resource. And we, as a court, were extremely upset about that because juvenile court and police should not be the resource. And so we gathered some officials from schools and officials from the police department, as well as mobile crises, because these are mobile crises response. If it's a mental health breakdown, a mobile crisis person should be responding. And what was happening is when the police or the schools were calling mobile crisis, and mobile crisis was asking, are they suicidal? Are they homicidal? If they are not, then they can't come. And so we said, we got to come up with a better response or better reason to do that. And so we were able to talk with mobile crisis, talk to the police, and get a kind of a collaboration of, you know, they may not be homicidal, may not be suicidal, but they're throwing shit. And that's just not what we need in the classroom right now. And so we were, you know, able to come up with a way that the mobile crisis could better support the schools. And so we have seen those types of calls to the police and to juvenile court decrease dramatically. And so it's about using the community partners that you have to make a difference. And so, you know, what Dr. Gibbs is talking about, when a child spends the night with me in my facility, it costs about $299. We just say $300. Like when you go to the store, $299, keep the penny. But it's $300 for them to spend the night with me in our facility. If they are to go into a facility that is run by the Department of Children's Services, it's probably on average between anywhere from $400 and $700, depending on the type of facility, a night for a child to be locked up in one of their facilities. And so when you think about the cost that it is on the backside, why don't we take that cost and put it on the front side? And so if we had, you know, like Dr. Portell and Dr. Gibbs was talking about earlier, if we had, instead of police in the schools, if we put that money into, you know, the school system, into counseling services, into psychiatrists, psychology, these are words I can't say. My sister's a psychologist, so she'll get mad that I said that. But, you know, if we put money on the front end to help deal with the trauma, then we don't need it on the back end. What we have seen in my disruptive ways is that we have, through my time here at Juvenile Court, diverted about 75% of our cases that are referred to the juvenile court system. We are diverting them away from the juvenile court system because they don't need to be with us. They may need some help in the community. They may need some resources. They may need some mentors. They may need some positive programs, but they don't need a case in juvenile court. And so we have diverted 75% of the cases that we're getting. And we've had super wonderful numbers over the last 3 years of our diversions. In fact, last year, the cases, or 2 years ago, because we do recidivism numbers for 2 years. And so 2 years ago, the cases that we diverted, 6% of those came back to the system. And only about 4% of those came back with a felony charge. So that means, I'm using my math, 94% of the youth that have been referred to the court system for some reason never came back to the court system. And that's where we need to put our money, on the front end of things. And so I'm able to say now, you know, months ago or years ago, you know, we were transferring, you know, 30 kids to the adult system. We've put that number down to less than 20, or, you know, I think last year was maybe 14. And it is a number that is still too high, in my opinion. But it is a number that is much better than what we used to do. And so we've got to do a better job at making sure that we are getting the resources and the money that we need to the youth on the front end of the process.
So, Judge, I want to get into some of the disruptions that you've done in the structures, but I want to specifically ask you, what do you, because I know you openly speak about this, when you hear the numbers that are disproportionate for children of Black and brown skin, what comes to you? What thoughts do you have? What do you think contributes? What's on your mind when you see those?
There's so much that contributes to it. It is truly we are in a society, and I'm glad people are talking about it and are recognizing it, but all of our systems were built on a racist platform. And so it's not just the justice part or the criminal part, it's also what we do in juvenile court, the neglect, dependent, and abuse part of the system as well. And if we deal, the majority of the cases that we deal with in juvenile court are about parents and about what the parents are not doing with their children. So if I have another example, I have, and I'm going to use Nashville, Tennessee as our basis. I have two families, one in Casey Homes, which is a Department of, it's a housing project. It's a housing area. Let me just say it as it is.
Absolutely.
Have someone that's in Casey Homes versus someone who's in Bellevue. Parents, kids out, let's say it's a baby. And let's say parents have slept with the baby in the bed and the baby falls off and rolls off the bed. I'm not going to say who amongst you that has not happened to. I don't raise your hand because somebody could come calling you. But child rolls off the bed. The parent gets up immediately, checks on child, sees that there might be something going on. Both of them go to their nearest hospital. So in Casey Homes, they're going to go to General Hospital. Over at Bellevue, they're going to go to Vanderbilt Hospital. General Hospital doesn't have a pediatric care team at General Hospital. Vanderbilt does. And so when the parent gets to General Hospital, they might be crying, they may be upset, they're scared, and the doctors work with them, calm down, it's going to be all right. We got to send your child over to Vanderbilt to do a more extensive check, blah, blah, blah. Just follow us, come with us, everything's going to be okay. So they're calm, they're not as nervous, they've got some reassurance, they're with some doctors, things going to happen. So they get to Vanderbilt Hospital, there's a care team. And this hospital sees this parent who may or may be calm now, may or may not, be as agitated or anxious as they were at the other hospital. Time's gone by, they're okay, they think their baby's okay, and they're not as necessarily worried. And so the care team starts questioning them. Well, I wonder, their affect is kind of flat. That's a sign of child abuse. Their affect is this way or that. All these things look at whether or not we should call DCS and we should determine whether there should be a referral. You come from Bellevue, you go straight to the hospital, and you have that same, oh my God, what happened to my baby? You get that immediately. You see that. You don't get that 30 minutes in between to calm down. And so you get an appropriate reaction and response to when you bring your child into custody or to the hospital. And so you probably won't even get a referral, a call to DCS because I'm sorry, it's an accident, and it's accepted and it's believed, and there's not a referral. But this family over here from Casey, it's not the appropriate response, so there's going to be a referral to DCS, and so there's going to be a look into it, and there's going to be a removal. And so once you remove a child, there's all kind of studies from 0 to 3, particularly, or 0 to 5, is when all that brain development, all that attachment, all of that stuff that children are supposed to be getting with their parents, you remove that based on a team's questionable response to what happened between the child and the parent. And so now you have a child that's on the trajectory of staying in the system. And then again, what we know from the studies is that children who go into custody at an early age are likely to stay in the system and turn into the delinquent system. So we already have one systematic set of things that are happening that are going to likely cause discrimination against a set of people. And, it's particularly Black and brown people, and it's poverty is a part of it as well, but it definitely discriminates against a group of people. And so we got that. We got child support cases where, we're dealing in juvenile court with unmarried parents, and there's custody battles, and we know how that affects children. That is one of the adverse childhood experiences that delays or can be a delay of part of the child's brain development. And so what we do is we demand that families who are receiving any type of state assistance, so if you're poor, which normally is minority folks, you're poor and you need help with child care assistance, or you need help with TANF benefits, whatever it is, you need help with insurance, whatever it is that you need help with, and you have a child, and now we have to generate a child support case against you. So you have a family, Casey Holmes, got to generate a child support case. You got the same family fighting over custody in Bellevue that doesn't get state assistance. There's not that immediate state action. And so once you have that state action, then you start having unfair advantages for that family. And then there you go again with another entree into the system. And again, once we're in this system, we have a hard time of getting out of it.
So Judge Calloway, I'm gonna hit you with one of the hot button topics that we deal with in schools. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not the perfect principal. I tell everybody that all the time. I have suspended my fair share of students. I will be lying to everybody on this call to say I've been a principal for 7 years and I've never suspended anyone. Would be lies. My teachers that's on the call will know that I have. But I'm gonna push some numbers out to you. And I just want to hear your thought process. We've looked at a study with the ACLU where 73% of students who were suspended eventually either have a failing grade or failed the course. 20% of students who were suspended multiple times, the likelihood of them dropping out of school increases by 20%. And then suspensions numbers almost triple the likelihood of a child entering the juvenile justice systems. So talk to me about, because we have a lot of educators on this line, from your perspective, when you start hearing those suspension numbers, how does that impact the work you see with our young people once they enter your side?
So, I cringe when I hear the suspension numbers because I know the trajectory of the children that get suspended. And the real issue is we use suspensions in the wrong way. We use suspensions when a child is not behaving the way that we think they should behave. And so what the schools do is they suspend these children and they say, go home, learn how to behave, and then come back. If we have not told them what it is about their behaviors that we are not appreciative, then how are they going to learn when they go home? So what I see when they get suspended and they go home, they're going home to either a place that does not have anybody that can be able to supervise them, whether it's because the parents have to work and cannot take time off to sit with them, or whether it's they're not being supervised, or they're going back to the same environment. I heard somebody talking about if a kid's parents and family always yell and cuss at each other, and that's just how they communicate, then the kid's going to communicate that same way when he goes to school. And if we have not taken the time to say, I get that that's how y'all talk at home, but we can't talk like that at school because of whatever reasons, and work through that. But what we do is, I done told you not to cuss, now you got to go home. So what are they going home to? They're going right back home to the cussing house, and they still don't know why they got kicked out of school. And so when they're out of school, and they're particularly the ones that are unsupervised, Gibbs first started when his grandmama said, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. And so, I one of the, I guess, most devastating cases that happened in our community that made people kind of take a look at what's going on with juvenile justice was, 5 very young children, ages 12 through 15, who were involved in a murder of an individual who was a musician, Belmont student. And the surprising thing, this happened in the middle of the day. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, where that age group probably should have been in school. And so what you get is you get this student who's suspended, this other student who's suspended, and they're sitting at home supervising themselves, and they're going to come up with something to do. And so what ends up happening is they end up coming up with the wrong thing to do. And you particularly have to look at that child and that child's adverse childhood experiences and that child's lack of being able to make positive decisions. And so if they were able to make positive decisions, they wouldn't have got suspended in the first place. And so we are piling on, just more and more reasons for them, or more and more opportunities for them to get in trouble.
Well, and Judge, I think too, and I know you can speak to this, is that intergenerational transmission, right? That it sometimes becomes a cycle of generational processes, right? And what you said about suspensions, Ricki, when I was a principal, I can tell you I suspended 35 kids for 52 days my first year as a principal. Like, I know that statistic because it was before I had my paradigm shift. When I learned about the impacts of trauma and learned about the impact of suspending kids, we decreased it by 50% last year. It was 1 kid for 1 day so we could come up with a plan. And that's on purpose. But why can we do that at Fall Hamilton? Because we have a team of people that are providing mental health and supports to kids. Now, what you said, Judge Calloway, earlier brings me to the statement of, if we have a child that comes into school and they don't read well, what do? Right? We teach them how to read. We have a child that can't do mathematics very well. We teach them mathematics. We have a child that lives under a different norm of behavior. And I think we have to be cautious on when we say the child isn't acting appropriately, because appropriate to us sometimes, especially being a white male, can have a lens that is very narrowed, right? Both my upbringing, the way my parents spoke to me, the way I handled it culturally, the way I was a preacher's son, all kinds of things, right? So what do? We don't have time to teach those situations. And sometimes we're actually teaching the wrong situation, like an adult speaks, you better listen and sit down and be quiet. Actually, I want you to be able to speak. I want you to be able to speak when you feel like there's a wrong, in a way that is safe for you, right? Not safe for the other person, because we have to be cautious, but there are ways we are pushing this agenda and work of compliance at school. So talk about what you've done with the school system over the last couple of years to kind of disrupt this.
Yeah, I've been on their side, I think. I love being the one at the table always saying, stop suspending, stop expelling. So I do that at every. I was part of the Positive and Safe Schools Advancing Greater Equity, where we did a lot of work with the school system and pushed with a lot of the discipline paradigms, a lot of the the grid that now they're supposed to follow. We took out things like you can't suspend for behavior unbecoming to I don't even remember what it was, behavior unbecoming to something. I mean, it was like, what is that? That was so subjective. And so what's unbecoming to Principal Portell might not be unbecoming to Dr. Gibbs. But you have,
right, actually.
And so, we said those kind of things have to stop. We cannot have a subjective tools and things in the discipline codes. We didn't really win a lot of those arguments, but we're still pushing. We push a lot. All of my, we don't call them probation officers per se. They are our support intervention and accountability officers. All of our officers are trained on school advocacy. And so, you know, when we're telling, on the one hand, you got to be in school, you got to do that. And they'll say, well, I'm trying, but they won't let me in. We're going to be there. We're going to be at the school saying, now tell me why it is you're not letting this kid in. We had a situation where an attorney was told that her kid couldn't come in because they owed money on a book. And she said, okay, how much do they owe? Pulled out her checkbook. Here your check. Let my child in. And, you know, we fight back on a regular basis to make sure that all of our children have an opportunity to learn. And so, you know, we worked with Dr. Joseph before he left and kind of put on the table, we need you to do a moratorium on arresting children 12 and under. Your people can yes, our principals and teachers in schools 12 years and under are arresting children. And people, like, when the story about that came up in Florida, where some 6-year-old got arrested, and people are like, oh my God, how could that happen? And I'm like, yeah, go down the street. That happens here every day. And so we asked Dr. Joseph to make a statement and say that cannot happen. And he did it. And literally the arrest went down tremendously, almost to almost nothing. And it was a wonderful stat that we could tell. You know, those are kind of things that we work with. You know, if it's resources, we will help you to put restorative justice in your schools. We have people that are trained in RJ practices and that are willing to work with each and every school about what it is. Why is it important to have a community circle in each class in the morning? Because you don't know if Sally was the victim of child abuse that night and was hiding under her bed, and when you come to tell her wake up and you push her, that you don't know that's going to trigger her. But if you start off if you take 5 minutes every morning and just start off with a check-in with a community circle within the class and say, what you have to eat last night, you're going to find out that Trey didn't have nothing to eat because his mama was too busy doing something and didn't have time to cook, and he's hungry. And he can't learn right now because he needs some food to help him. And so these are the things that we are willing to sit down with the schools and do. And we've taken an active role in that. We have a Metro Student Attendance Center. And the magistrate that runs that her name is Jennifer Wade. And if you think I'm a fighter, she is so much more. She is just a wonderful disruptor herself. And she goes to the schools and she makes the principals come and say, now tell me again, this child is telling me that they've been up there 3 times and you won't let them in. Tell me why it is that you won't let them in.
I think that's a perfect point to jump in, Judge Calloway, with Nathan's question. So like Magistrate Wade, we have a lot of advocates on this call. I see parents, I see educators, community leaders, and Nathan asks, as advocates, what is the single item that you as a judge need from us to help make this change in the paradigm? First and foremost, I need people to recognize that the system is definitely discriminatory. And we got to call it as it is, and we have to say it. And I need people to truly advocate and to fight the fight. You know, we don't, as judges, we don't always get it right. We don't necessarily see, no, the system's not against that person. It's just, that person is something like, you need to say, no. If this person hadn't been in this situation, we would have never been here because of this system. And we just need people to truly to know the systems, to know the parties are advocating for, and to speak the truth in the courthouse. When it's brought to our attention, then we have a better idea and a better ability to make a difference.
You got another question here. It says, as a trauma trainer and advocate, how do you go about convincing judges and lawyers that they actually do need to be trauma informed?
I bang my head on the wall at every conference and say, when are these people ever going to get it? When are they going to get it? But the most important thing that I do is have trained all of our people, all of our staff is trauma informed. A lot of them are always rolling their eyes like, oh, she's making us do more training. But we know how to approach our youth in a better way than we ever have before. And what I show these other judges and the attorneys is the actual data behind what we are doing. Since I have been in office, since 2013, the number of youth that have been arrested has decreased by 60%. And that's because we are all working together to be more trauma informed, to make sure that we're only arresting those who are at risk to themselves or to the safety of our community. And we're defining what the safety of our community is. I apologize for people getting their cars stolen, but that is not a detainable offense. Car theft is not detainable. And these are the kind of things that we talk about and that we try to communicate and educate to our community, that we are not going to hold youth in detention for just any old thing. The old days of scared straight, you can't scare nobody straight. That makes no sense. What takes a child to change is relationship. Is to know that this person, no matter how bad I act, this person is going to be with me through it all. It takes relationship. So scaring somebody to make them do right is a misnomer. And so when we get people to say, you just need to lock them up, you just need to put them in detention, you need to do that scare straight. No, I don't, because we know there are studies, and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act puts out documents that talk about the dangers of putting kids in detention. And so it is, one of those things that we got to push the system, push other judges to recognize that what we're saying is actually going to make a difference.
So I'm gonna bring it a little closer to home, and I apologize if I say your name wrong, Wade. How about I just call you Wade?
We go by last names around here.
Yeah, but Wade hit on it. Obviously, locally, we've recently rolled back some of the work that started with Dr. Joseph, and the board decided to change some of the policies. So Wade asks, how do we get the board to rectify that? Because thinking about, as we come back from a tornado and a pandemic, students will come back with even more trauma. And as a result of that trauma, we may see, increased behaviors that will lead to more of the suspensions that pushes us right back to the pipeline.
And Ricki, I'm going to take the word may out and say we are going to see it.
Agreed.
And we're going to see it from our students.
Yep.
Well, we are going to come back different. We're going to come back more stressed. So I love this. I love that she brought this up. What's your thoughts, Judge?
I was so concerned. I think Dewana was part of the teams that were working to try and make sure that this did not happen, even though it did. I believe in this speaking truth, as always, and I have had good long conversations with Dr. Battle, and I have promised her that I'm going to give it a chance, but I'm going to be asking for statistics at every point that we can. I need weekly reports on who's getting suspended. And I want weekly reports on why they're getting suspended and how long they're getting suspended. Mm-hmm. When you think about moving the time from suspensions from 5 days, which is too long, to 10 days, 2 weeks, that's 2 weeks of learning. 2 weeks of learning. When a child comes back after a 2-week vacation, holiday, because they're not learning at home. I'm going to tell you that right now. Whatever it is that they did for 2 weeks, they are so far behind in any type of learning. And we are losing that child right then and there. When we say this child's getting 2 weeks, then we are determining that child is never going to have a future in our system. And so, I believe that we just have to be vigilant. We have to stay on them. We got to look at numbers. We got to make sure that we are, and I have actually had wonderful conversations with Dr. Springer as well. We're going to do youth courts in all of our high schools, and we're going to expand youth courts to include discipline. And so let me not have this disciplinary team to do all of these discipline process. Let's do it by a group of their peers. And let's train the students on how to teach each other how to be better, how to be what I'm not supposed to say, more appropriate or whatever it is, how to learn how to deal with their truth in the system that doesn't disrupt the rest of the school. And so, you know, moving some of those discipline practices away from the administrative disciplinary team, we're hoping will make a difference. And so, I vow, I know Matt Wade does, my court administrator, Kathy Sinback, we are going to be very active when the youth come back, to making sure that there's some accountability from us as adults to help our youth deal with the trauma that they're dealing with, and not to make it more punitive.
Yeah, so we have about 4 more minutes, so I want to give some closing thoughts, leave time for Portell, and then Judge Calloway, we're going to have you close us out. But you hit on a point there that I don't want to just let it blow past you. When she said we're moving suspensions from 5 to 10 days, so you're talking about 2 weeks in a 9-week period. So I'll tell everybody, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but 2 weeks in a 9-week period equates to about 21% of the 9 weeks is now being missed because a child is suspended. And we know if a child is suspended, as teachers, it's not mandatory that they have to make up work, or it's not mandatory that you have to give them work. So now we're sending that child home 2 weeks and basically saying that 9 weeks is a wash, because the likelihood of you coming back and being successful is slim to none. One of the comments that I saw in there, someone talked about having grace warriors. If you know me, why this conversation was so critical to me, you all know, y'all have heard my story. I was kicked out of school when I was in 4th grade for 180 days. One of my favorite teachers in high school should have had me kicked out because I used to always curse and do everything else in class, but she showed me grace. Again, someone that in my youth, I'm glad my mama not listening, but I used to break into cars and do all that kind of stuff and steal cars and and people gave me grace when I could have been sentenced as an adult. They gave me probation. And so now you're listening to Dr. Ricki Gibbs versus Ricki Gibbs, inmate 9273854. So when we talk about not letting one situation dictate a life of a child, it's critical because as educators, we hold the key to this school to prison pipeline. And if we do our work right, we begin to decrease the number of students that Judge Calloway has to see. And that way, the ones that she does have to see, she can work her magic to ensure that they don't spend that time in our prison system. They can get back to our educational system. So just a little bit about why this conversation was important to me. I'll turn it over to Portell, and then Judge Calloway, I'll let you bring us home.
So I'm not confessing any of my previous crimes, although there were some. I'm not going to confess them because I'm just not. Maybe one day, but I do want to say that I want to talk very briefly just about the transformation of my school. And it started with one word. It's called Preforgiven. I said it today. My assistant principal's on here. I said it today 5 times to my staff. You have unlimited pre-forgiveness and an insurmountable amount of grace from this time. And it's exactly what we have to do with our kids, you all. We can't assume, and we can never put our expectations on every kid as if they're going to meet them without support and guidance. I don't meet the expectation I have on me every day, right? And for some reason, we feel that kids can't make mistakes. And I think that part of this disruption is thinking about, why do we suspend kids? And let's be honest, it's about the adults, really. It's about what's easiest, because it's easy to send a kid home. I tell my staff all the time, that's the easy way out. I could send them home for 5 days. They're going to come back more pissed than when they left, and we're going to have bigger problems. The hard part is sitting down with kids, sitting down with parents, asking questions like, how can we support you? Okay, they need their medication. We're going and picking it up. You don't have transportation. We're going to drop it off at your house. My school counselor did it all year, right? The parent couldn't afford it. We got your back. It's these pieces of disruption of why do we do what we do. And Ricki, when I talked about that suspension of how many kids I've suspended, and I know I saw some faces, including Judge's face, one like this, I did that because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. That's what principals did. But we got to realize we have to stop doing things that we know is not in the best interest of our kids just because that's what's always been done. And so I love that Judge is on here because she is a disruptor. She's trying to do things in the appropriate way. She understands the impact of the kids that are coming to our schools. And to be honest, they may be more misunderstood than misguided, I think is more of the problem, or not listened to when they have a voice to speak, instead of allowing them to have that voice, which we call habit 8, finding your voice. We want to silence our kids. And so I just want to encourage you all, think about the systems and structures you use in your classroom. If you have a clip chart and you're public humiliating kids, it's no different than putting them on public trial. It doesn't work for kids. Think about these little systems that we've always done because they just are what we've done. Judge, you've got the last. I'm sorry, you all, we're over about 2 minutes, but Judge is going to clear us out here.
All right, so quickly, for me, it's all about brain development and the science behind brain development. If we know our brains don't fully develop until about 25 years old, for Matt, it was about 37.
Right.
If we know, yeah, if we know that, then why are we putting expectations on our children to be able to do adult decisions and to make the right decisions each and every time? I remember when I was their age, just about 10 years ago, and the decisions that I was making during that time. I can't say too much as well because I believe both my mom and sister are on, and they don't need to know about all of my crimes yet. But we got to recognize, especially in the schools, and someone said this on the chat, that the schools have the children for most of their waking hours. And we got to understand that they're coming from such diverse backgrounds, such diverse situations. Their minds are not developed, particularly the frontal lobe, the part that, is the decision-making part of their mind, is not developed. And if they have a whole lot of childhood trauma, a whole lot of adverse childhood experiences, their brain is not going to develop. And so we're not doing them a service by saying, because you're having these issues, you need to be excluded from our system. What we're doing is we're destroying society, and we're destroying a large number of youth who could be very, very, very successful if we just take the time to spend with them and the time to really give them the understanding, the love, the learning, the structure that they need. They got to learn everything at the school, including behavior. They got to learn it at the school, and we've got to do a better job at teaching them. We need to take out the police and use that money to put in the counselors, the restorative justice practices, the social workers, the people who are going to help manage our youth in a better way. That's all. I'm done.
Ricki,
go ahead, Portell.
Feedback, buddy.
Yeah. So as we always tell you all, man, we would just love feedback as we continue these series and just dig in deeper. We would love your thoughts as we close out today. Again, thank you to Judge Calloway. Portell hit on this quote earlier, and it'll be our final thought. As educators, we know if a child cannot read, we teach that child to read. If a child can't do math, we teach that child numeracy. But when a child can't behave, our first go-to is to suspend or expel. We have to change that narrative, make that paradigm shift to do the work that's necessary, that if a child is showing what we consider as disruptive, and I put that in air quote because it could be normal to them, but in our lens as educators, if it's viewed as disruptive behavior, what can we do to help change that child's world? If we do that work on the front end, we will ensure that our boys and girls have the opportunity to stay out of that juvenile justice system. And again, that'll be our way to eradicate the school to prison pipeline. Man, thank you all for being with us. We apologize we went over a little bit tonight, but we appreciate you, Judge Calloway. Thank you as always. You are amazing. Have a great evening. We'll catch y'all next time.